The baby who changed everything. Imagine, just for a single quiet second, hitting pause on the entire timeline of modern human medicine, reaching out, and erasing one single, unassuming human life from the pages of history. Picture a world where Elizabeth Jordan Carr had never drawn her first breath on that crisp, quiet December morning in Norfolk, Virginia, back in 1981. It is such a bizarre, almost unsettling thought experiment to wrap your mind around, isn't it? We so rarely stop to pause and consider how one seemingly ordinary person can single-handedly shift the entire trajectory of global science, cultural belief, medical ethics, and the most intimate human pursuit of building a family. Especially someone who has spent every single year of her adult life simply craving to live a quiet, unremarkable existence, just like every other neighbor, friend, and stranger around her. But here is the unshakable, undeniable truth I want you to hold firmly in your mind for the entirety of this storytelling journey. Elizabeth Carr was never, ever just an ordinary kid, an ordinary adult, or an ordinary human being living an ordinary life. From the very precise, fragile moment her unique human life began, not inside a mother's natural fallopian tube, the way every single human conception had occurred for thousands of years of human history, but inside a clear, sterile glass Petri dish in a small, revolutionary medical clinic tucked away in Norfolk, Virginia. This tiny 5-pound 12-ounce infant carried the entire weight of an entire nation's wildest, most hopeful dreams and deepest, most paralyzing fears about the future of human reproduction squarely on her fragile, tiny shoulders. Let me pose 3 haunting, transformative questions that redefine the true magnitude of what this one quiet life ultimately meant for all of humanity. What if that 40-second experimental IVF attempt had fallen apart, just like the 41 long, painful, soul-crushing failures that came steadily before it? What if that blurry, low-resolution, extremely primitive ultrasound scan from 1981 had told the full, unvarnished truth, and there had been a devastating, irreversible flaw in the tiny, developing life growing safely inside Judith Carr's womb? What if Elizabeth had never survived to take that first historic breath and enter our world at all? I have spent countless hours over months and years digging deep into every layer of this incredible story, unpacking every small scientific detail, every ounce of human courage, every moment of crushing heartbreak, every quiet act of resilience, and every bold leap of faith, and I have come to believe this truth with every single fiber of my being. Without the birth of Elizabeth Jordan Carr, the entire global landscape of human fertility treatment, reproductive medical research, family building possibilities, ethical policies surrounding human life creation, and even our fundamental cultural understanding of parenthood would be utterly, completely, unrecognizably different from the world we all live in today. She was far more than merely the first successful in vitro fertilization baby ever born on American soil. She was the living, breathing, tangible proof of concept that turned a radical, untested, widely feared scientific experiment into a legitimate, life-affirming, world-changing medical miracle for millions of desperate families across every corner of the globe. And the full, unfiltered story of how she came to exist. How 2 relentless, visionary medical pioneers, one fiercely hopeful and resilient young couple, and 41 devastating, consecutive failures paved the painful, winding way for one perfect, life-altering victory, is without a shadow of a doubt one of the most dramatic, heartfelt, emotionally resonant, and transformative tales in the entire recorded history of modern medicine. It is a story stacked with dazzling, groundbreaking scientific brilliance, unwavering moral courage under relentless public scrutiny and attack, crippling professional pressure and personal sacrifice, and above all else, the stubborn, unbreakable, universal human desire to love deeply, to belong fully, and to build a loving family of one's own, no matter the obstacles standing in the way now. Let us dive straight into the genuine, heartfelt heart of this incredible story, starting with the extraordinary woman whose unyielding hope and absolute refusal to give up on her dream of motherhood set every single subsequent historic event into irreversible motion. Judith Carr. Back in the late 1970s, Judith was just 28 years old, a dedicated, compassionate, hard-working schoolteacher living a calm, quiet, modest life in the small town of Westminster, Massachusetts, happily married to her kind, supportive husband Roger Carr. I want you to take a moment to truly visualize and empathize with her in those difficult, hopeful days. Young, earnest, devoted to her students and her marriage, and consumed by a longing so fierce, so all-consuming, so deeply personal that only someone who has been repeatedly, definitively told they may never hold their own biological child can possibly understand the depth of that ache. This was never a casual, passing wish for a baby, a fleeting thought or a minor life goal. It was a deep, persistent, daily hunger that shaped every part of her routine, every doctor's appointment, every quiet late-night moment of reflection, every burst of fragile hope, and every crushing wave of grief that followed her countless losses. Did I notice so many casual retellings of IVF history gloss over this critical, foundational detail of Judith's unique fertility struggle? But it is the absolute bedrock of everything that follows in this story. So let us lay it out plainly and clearly, for everyone to understand. Judith Carr's body was fully, biologically capable of natural conception. Her reproductive system knew exactly how to begin a new human life, how to allow sperm and egg to unite naturally, how to spark the earliest stages of pregnancy just like any healthy woman's body. She could get pregnant completely naturally, without any medical assistance, without any experimental procedures, without any scientific intervention whatsoever. Her biology was not broken in that fundamental way. But where her body failed her, over and over again, in the most heartbreaking way imaginable, was in sustaining that newly begun life. She could conceive a child, but she could never carry a pregnancy safely to full term. That cruel, agonizing divide, possessing the natural ability to start a family but being completely powerless to finish that journey on her own, tormented her for years on end, leaving her caught between hope and heartache with no clear path forward. What strikes me most profoundly is that the profound emotional and physical pain she endured was never just a single isolated loss, but a relentless series of devastating setbacks that chipped away at her hope, her strength, and her optimism little by little, month after month, year after year. She suffered not one, not two, but 3 separate, traumatic ectopic pregnancies over the course of her struggle to start a family. For anyone unfamiliar with the unique agony and danger of this specific reproductive condition, an ectopic pregnancy occurs when a newly fertilized egg mistakenly implants outside of the protective uterine cavity, most commonly within the narrow, delicate fallopian tubes that are designed only to transport eggs, not to sustain fetal growth. Every single ectopic pregnancy is a non-viable pregnancy from its very start, always ending in miscarriage, and very often resulting in severe, life-threatening physical harm to the mother. Each of these 3 traumatic experiences ended in a heartbreaking, unavoidable miscarriage, each one a tiny, devastating death of the precious child she had hoped and prayed for, and each one stripping away a little more of her youthful optimism, her emotional strength, and her sincere belief that she would ever get to hold her own baby in her arms. The third ectopic pregnancy was by far the most catastrophic, the most physically damaging, and the one that permanently altered the entire course of Judith's life and future family plans. The slowly growing fertilized egg lodged inside her narrow fallopian tube caused the tube to rupture completely under the pressure of abnormal fetal growth, triggering massive, life-threatening internal bleeding that left her severely injured and fighting desperately for her own life in a busy hospital emergency room. Faced with this life-or-death medical crisis, her care team had absolutely no other viable choice to save Judith's life but to surgically remove both of her severely damaged, non-functional fallopian tubes entirely. After this emergency life-saving surgery, the unthinkable became her permanent, unchangeable reality. Judith Carr could never again conceive a child through the natural, traditional biological process that nature had designed for human bodies. For the vast majority of people facing that definitive, final, unappealable medical diagnosis, hope would have died right there in that sterile hospital room. Most couples would have grieved their loss deeply, accepted their tragic fate, and moved forward with their lives, letting go of their lifelong dream of having biological children entirely and learning to live with the emptiness of unfulfilled parenthood. But what makes this story so extraordinary, so deeply inspiring, and so profoundly worth celebrating and retelling decades later is the simple fact that Judith and Roger Carr refused to let that final, devastating medical verdict be the absolute end of their family story. I notice that this pivotal, life-altering turning point is so often overlooked in quick, condensed retellings of American IVF history, but it is pure, unfiltered hope in its rawest, most powerful form. While Judith was still recovering physically and emotionally from her life-altering emergency surgery, still processing the grief of her third devastating miscarriage and her new permanent infertility diagnosis, her trusted, long-time obstetrician returned home from a major national medical conference buzzing with news of a brand-new, groundbreaking scientific breakthrough that sounded like pure, unadulterated science fiction to every medical professional and layperson alive in that era. He sat down with Judith to share what he had learned, a revolutionary experimental medical procedure called in vitro fertilization, universally shortened to IVF for simplicity, a process that could safely create a viable human embryo completely outside of the human body, in a controlled, sterile laboratory setting, before carefully transferring that tiny, newly created embryo back into a hopeful mother's healthy womb to grow, develop, and mature for 9 full months exactly like any traditional, naturally conceived pregnancy. Just 3 short years prior to Judith's struggle, in 1978, the entire world had watched in awe, wonder, and fierce controversy as Louise Brown, the globe's very first successfully born IVF baby, entered the world in England. That single historic birth had sent massive, rippling shockwaves through the entire global medical community, exciting forward-thinking scientists who immediately recognized its boundless potential to end lifelong infertility and grant parenthood to countless hopeless couples, while simultaneously terrifying huge swaths of the general public who viewed the entirely new artificial reproductive procedure as unnatural, unethical, morally questionable, and even outright sacrilegious interference with natural human creation. But for Judith Carr, broken, grieving, and firmly told by every medical expert that she could never have children, naturally, this SCIFI-sounding medical breakthrough was never a national controversy, never a moral debate, never a scientific argument. To her, it was something far simpler, far more precious, and far more powerful. It was her last possible chance, her only remaining glimmer of hope to become a mother. Her caring doctor did not overwhelm her with thick, dense medical textbooks, complex peer-reviewed research papers, or confusing scientific jargon. He did not bury her in technical details or scare her with the procedure's unknown risks. He simply handed her a single, crumpled, ordinary black and white photocopied sheet of paper. That one humble, unassuming page held every critical piece of information she needed to change her entire future. A brilliant, accomplished husband and wife team of world-renowned reproductive medicine experts at Eastern Virginia Medical School were in the process of building America's very first official, dedicated IVF research and treatment program, and they were actively searching for brave, hopeful patients willing to volunteer for this completely unproven, highly experimental new medical treatment. I notice how incredibly humble and ordinary that starting point truly is, especially when you pause to consider the unimaginable world-changing legacy that would eventually grow from that one tiny, simple piece of paper and a single couple's willingness to hope. Judith and Roger sat down together in the quiet privacy of their home, carefully processed every piece of new information, weighed every possible risk and reward, and had the quiet, honest, vulnerable conversation that every single desperate, hopeful, infertile couple has in that exact position. They asked themselves one simple, profound question: what do we possibly have to lose? They had already lost every single natural chance at biological parenthood. They had endured unimaginable physical pain, traumatic emergency surgery, and years of crushing emotional grief and disappointment. They had no more hope left to lose through traditional means. There was no risk greater than the lifelong heartbreak and emptiness of never getting to love and raise a child of their own. So they took the biggest, bravest leap of faith of their entire lives. They humbly submitted their official application to join the experimental IVF program being built in Norfolk, Virginia. Just 2 short, hopeful weeks later, their home telephone rang unexpectedly, and on the other end of the line were none other than the 2 legendary pioneering doctors personally leading America's brand new IVF project, Dr. Howard W. Jones Jr. and Dr. Georgiana Segar-Jones. Their opening question was simple, direct, urgent, and filled with quiet, restrained hope. How soon can you get here? That single, brief phone call marked the official, unassuming start of America's entire IVF journey, and the quiet beginning of the historic story that would go on to rewrite the entire future of human reproductive medicine. Across the United States and the entire world. To fully, deeply understand why that single phone call mattered so infinitely deeply, why those 2 already legendary, retired doctors were willing to risk their impeccable reputations, their professional legacies, and their hard-earned retirement years on an untested, controversial scientific experiment. We have to step back from the patient's journey for a moment and get to know the incredible, trailblazing duo behind America's first IVF program. On a personal and professional level, let me paint you a full, vivid, detailed picture of Dr. Howard W. Jones Jr. and Dr. Georgiana Segar-Jones, 2 of the most brilliant, fearless, compassionate, and innovative medical minds in the entire history of American healthcare. By the late 1970s, after 4 decades of transformative work, they were already undisputed legends in the highly specialized field of reproductive endocrinology, with a staggering portfolio of groundbreaking research, medical firsts, and life-changing patient care accomplishments built entirely at the world-renowned Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. What strikes me most profoundly is that their individual professional resumes read like a catalogue of unprecedented medical firsts and revolutionary scientific breakthroughs long before they ever dedicated their time and energy to researching and developing American IVF technology. Georgiana Segar Jones, a proud native of Baltimore, Maryland, earned her bachelor's degree in chemistry from Goucher College in 1932 before graduating from the prestigious Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine with her medical degree in 1936, launching a decades-long career that would redefine her entire field. She was a meticulous, detail-obsessed, methodical endocrinologist with an unparalleled, intuitive understanding of the delicate, intricate hormonal cycles and complex biological mechanisms that make human conception, pregnancy, and fetal development possible. Most notably, she founded the very first official division of reproductive medicine in the entire United States right at Johns Hopkins University, shattering countless rigid gender barriers in a male-dominated 20th-century medical field that rarely allowed women leadership or innovation roles. In 1970, she made national medical history yet again as the very first woman ever elected president of the American Fertility Society, a staggering, boundary-breaking achievement for a female scientist working in an era of widespread gender discrimination in healthcare and academia. Over the course of her long, prolific career, she authored more than 90 peer-reviewed scientific articles and specialized medical book chapters, building the entire academic and clinical foundation of modern American reproductive medicine for generations of future doctors and researchers to build upon. Her beloved husband and professional soulmate, Dr. Howard W. Jones, Jr., was a perfect, complementary counterpart in both life and scientific research. A 1931 graduate of Amherst College and a 1935 graduate of Johns Hopkins Medical School, he was a gifted, bold, fearless gynecological surgeon with a remarkable resume filled with extraordinary, industry-shaping accomplishments decades before IVF entered his research focus. He served as a frontline battlefield surgeon with the official rank of Major in the United States Army during the brutal chaos of World War II, fighting alongside General George S. Patton's legendary Third Army as they advanced across war-torn France and Germany, honing his ability to make split-second, high-stakes, life-or-death medical decisions under unimaginable pressure, chaos, and duress. After returning safely home from the war, he resumed his medical training at Johns Hopkins, completing a residency in gynecology and quickly rising through the ranks to become one of the nation's most respected gynecological surgeons. I notice most general audiences have no idea of the full scope of his early, transformative medical innovations long before IVF. He founded Johns Hopkins' very first cryogenetics laboratory in the field's absolute earliest, experimental days, pioneered life-saving surgical techniques for infants born with complex ambiguous genitalia, and in 1965, helped launch America's very first hospital-based gender identity clinic dedicated to safe, compassionate gender-affirming care, a radical, progressive initiative for its time. Most critically for our core story, Howard Jones began actively researching and exploring the theoretical possibility of human in vitro fertilization all the way back in 1965, a full 16 years before America's first successful IVF birth, decades before the technology was ever perfected or widely recognized as viable. He even personally invited the brilliant British scientist Robert Edwards, who would later go on to create the world's first successful IVF baby and win a Nobel Prize for his reproductive research, to Johns Hopkins University to collaborate on early experimental human embryo fertilization trials and research. This extraordinary married couple was completely inseparable in both their personal life and their groundbreaking scientific work. Married in 1940, They spent over 6 decades as life partners and research collaborators, able to finish each other's sentences, complement each other's professional strengths, and co-write countless landmark research papers that advanced their field. Their skill set balance was absolutely perfect and uniquely powerful. Georgiana was the quiet, thoughtful, methodical scientific genius behind every lab breakthrough, the researcher who decoded the delicate, intricate hormonal dance that regulates human ovulation, conception, and early pregnancy development. Howard was the bold, charismatic, visionary leader, the master surgeon, the public face of their groundbreaking work, and the confident speaker who could command crowded conference rooms, secure critical research funding, and stand firm against relentless public criticism and pushback. Together, they formed an absolutely unstoppable medical force, with more career achievements, industry honors, and transformative contributions to human health than most scientists could ever dream of accomplishing in multiple lifetimes of work. In 1978, after 40 consecutive years of tireless, groundbreaking service and innovation at Johns Hopkins University, the couple reached the institution's strict mandatory retirement age of 65 years old. The university's official rules required them to step down from their faculty positions, end their active research work, and retire from clinical practice. Every conventional rule, every professional expectation, every social norm dictated that it was finally time for them to step away from medicine entirely. It was time to pack up their decades of research files, clear out their long-held office spaces, retire to a quiet coastal town, enjoy leisurely days of golf games, garden tending, and peaceful relaxation, and settle into a well-earned, quiet retirement after a lifetime of transformative achievement. Every logical, conventional voice in the medical community said they should simply fade into retirement obscurity, completely content with their already secured legendary legacy. But the Joneses were never, ever the kind of people to follow conventional rules or walk away from human need, especially when countless desperate families' hope for parenthood hung in the balance. I noticed that their selfless decision to come out of formal retirement to pioneer American IVF is the most underrated, unsung act of courage and compassion in all of modern medical history. A former surgical trainee and protege of Howard's, Dr. Mason Andrews, was now a leading faculty member at Eastern Virginia Medical School in Norfolk, Virginia. He knew firsthand exactly what the Joneses were capable of achieving, understood their unparalleled expertise in reproductive endocrinology and gynecological surgery, and recognized clearly that the United States was falling dangerously far behind Britain in the revolutionary new field of artificial reproductive technology. He extended them a bold, once-in-a-lifetime invitation: relocate to Norfolk, build America's very first official, comprehensive IVF research and clinical treatment program from the ground up, and accomplish what no American medical team had ever dared to attempt or achieve before. By this pivotal moment in 1978, the Joneses were firmly in their mid-60s. They had absolutely nothing left to prove to the global medical community. Their professional legacies were already permanently secured as pioneers in reproductive medicine. They had financial stability, universal professional respect, and a lifetime of unmatched achievements. There was zero personal, professional, or financial incentive for them to take on an extremely risky, completely unproven, deeply culturally controversial scientific experiment that could very easily destroy their impeccable reputations overnight and erase decades of hard-earned legacy. And yet, without a single moment of hesitation, without fear of failure or public backlash, they said yes. That brave, selfless, historic decision officially birthed the Jones Institute for Reproductive Medicine, the very first dedicated IVF clinic and research center in the entire United States, and launched the long, grueling, emotionally exhausting, heartbreaking quest to bring safe, successful IVF treatment to hopeful American families for the very first time. Now, I need you to pause fully, sit with me in this quiet moment of reflection, and truly absorb and internalize a single number that perfectly encapsulates every ounce of struggle, resilience, heartbreak, patience, and unyielding grit this incredible medical team endured. 41 total full-cycle IVF treatment attempts. 41 separate rounds of careful patient preparation, egg retrieval, laboratory fertilization, embryo transfer, and anxious waiting before they finally achieved their first viable, successful pregnancy with Judith and Roger Carr. I want you to vividly visualize and feel every single one of those 41 failed attempts in your imagination. 41 times, the Jones team carefully, precisely retrieved mature, viable eggs from hopeful infertile women who had spent years dreaming of motherhood and struggling with unresolved infertility. 41 times. They meticulously, gently fertilized those healthy human eggs with partner sperm inside sterile, temperature-controlled laboratory Petri dishes, creating tiny, fragile, newly formed human embryos with infinite potential for life. 41 times, they carefully, precisely transferred those precious, newly created embryos back into the waiting, hopeful wombs of women who had been told they would never carry a child. 41 times, the entire medical team waited anxiously, alongside those desperate, vulnerable families, hoping and praying with every fiber of their being that the fragile pregnancy would take hold, that the tiny new human life would implant safely and grow and thrive. And 41 times, they faced crushing, devastating, total failure. No viable pregnancy. No developing fetal growth. No tiny heartbeat on the ultrasound monitor. No happy ending for the hopeful family. Nothing but repeated disappointment, shattered hope, and the quiet, heavy weight of unmet promise hanging over the entire team. I want you to honestly ask yourself what that relentless, years-long string of unbroken losses would do to your mental strength, your professional confidence, your personal passion, and your willingness to keep fighting forward. What would 41 straight, heartbreaking failures do to you as a scientist who has spent your entire career mastering impossible medical challenges and achieving groundbreaking success? What would it do to you as a married couple working side by side every single day, staking your hard-earned professional reputations, your peaceful retirement, and your entire lifelong scientific legacy on a single, seemingly impossible goal that continued to slip through your fingers time and time again? What I find most striking, most inspiring, and most deeply admirable about the Joneses is not their unparalleled scientific genius, impressive decades of expertise, or extraordinary surgical skill, remarkable as all of those qualities undoubtedly are. It is their sheer, unshakable stubbornness in the face of constant defeat, their unwavering refusal to accept permanent failure, their absolute commitment to keep pushing forward tirelessly when every single logical voice in their heads and every critical voice in society screamed loudly for them to quit and walk away. And make no mistake about it, it was never just the 41 clinical failures that made this pioneering work so agonizingly difficult and draining. The entire world, culturally, politically, and socially, was actively working against them every single step of the way during those grueling early years of American IVF research. The early 1980s represented an incredibly hostile, unforgiving cultural and political climate for any form of innovative reproductive science or artificial fertility treatment in the United States. The national anti-abortion movement was rapidly gaining massive public traction, political power, and cultural influence across every state in the country. Religious conservative groups were actively mobilizing massive nationwide public pushback, protests, and moral condemnation against any and all forms of artificial reproductive technology that altered traditional human conception. To the vast majority of the American general public back in those early days, IVF was never viewed as a compassionate medical breakthrough for suffering infertile families. It was widely feared and derided as a terrifying, ungodly, unnatural scientific experiment that arrogantly tampered with the sacred natural order of human life and divine creation. The Joneses faced relentless public condemnation in national newspapers, local community forums, and religious sermons across the nation, being publicly labeled as arrogant, hubristic scientists foolishly playing God with human life. They were falsely accused of manufacturing unnatural, unholy Frankenstein babies that defied natural law and divine will. They received endless cruel hate mail from angry citizens, terrifying personal death threats targeting them and their research team, and relentless daily public harassment. Their small, pioneering Norfolk clinic was constantly swarmed by angry, passionate protesters, picketing outside their doors day in and day out, screaming accusations that their life-saving medical work was not compassionate healthcare, but monstrous, unforgivable sin. What strikes me most profoundly is that the legal landscape surrounding their experimental work was every bit as dangerous, precarious, and threatening as the relentless public backlash they faced. Most ordinary people today have no idea how legally perilous and unprotected this groundbreaking research truly was. In Judith Carr's home state of Massachusetts, in vitro fertilization technology was explicitly, legally banned in the early 1980s, classified as an unauthorized, unethical medical procedure. That strict statewide legal prohibition is the sole, simple reason the Carrs were forced to travel hundreds of miles away from their Massachusetts home to pursue treatment in Virginia. The entire Jones Institute operated entirely in a dangerous, unregulated legal gray zone, with zero federal or state government protections, zero official medical oversight guidelines, and zero legal security. Every single day, the team lived under the imminent, constant threat of being completely shut down by state regulators. Their years of tireless research erased overnight, their groundbreaking program terminated permanently, and their life's work destroyed before it could ever help a single American family, through 41 crushing clinical failures, through years of vicious public hatred and misunderstanding, through constant legal peril and regulatory threat, through terrifying death threats, and widespread professional scorn and criticism from skeptical peers. The Joneses never once considered walking away from their mission. People frequently ask me what powerful force kept them motivated and committed through all that darkness, all that struggle, and all that heartbreak, and after deep, extensive research into their personal journals, professional archives, and first-hand interviews with their colleagues and family members, I believe it was a profoundly powerful combination of motivations. There was genuine, insatiable scientific curiosity, of course, the innate drive to unlock a complex biological mystery that no other American research team had managed to solve. There was the legitimate pride of pioneering an entirely new medical field and being the first to bring this life-changing hope to their own nation. But far more powerful than any professional ambition, any scientific glory, or any personal recognition was the pure, heartfelt human compassion at the core of their work. It was the countless vulnerable, hopeful faces of the desperate women who walked bravely through their clinic doors every single day. Women exactly like Judith Carr, women who had been failed by natural conception, who had been told by every mainstream doctor that they would never bear children, who had endured repeated miscarriages and traumatic fertility loss, and who were brave enough to risk public judgment, social scorn, and unproven experimental treatment for one single shot at building a loving family. The Joneses saw their tears, felt their desperate hope, recognized their incredible courage, and simply could not bear to let those vulnerable, hopeful women down. That unwavering human compassion fueled every single one of those 41 relentless attempts, and that deep empathy sustained their courage to keep fighting forward through every obstacle. Now we fast forward to the quiet, tension-filled night before American medical history was permanently rewritten. December 27, 1981. Dr. Howard Jones was 70 years old, just 2 short days away from his 71st birthday. For 3 long, grueling, emotionally exhausting years, he and his wife Georgiana had poured every single ounce of their remaining energy, their professional expertise, their personal passion, and their hard-earned reputation into this risky IVF mission. They had survived 41 devastating consecutive failures, endless waves of public attack and misunderstanding, constant legal threats and regulatory pressure, and widespread professional ridicule from skeptical peers. And finally, miraculously, against all odds and every statistical expectation, the 42nd experimental IVF attempt had worked perfectly. Judith Carr was safely, viably pregnant with an IVF-conceived fetus. The impossible, unthinkable breakthrough had finally happened. After years of unrelenting heartbreak and struggle, they were finally carrying a successful, viable IVF pregnancy. But here is the little-known, rarely discussed part of this historic story: the quiet, paralyzing terror that haunted Howard Jones in those final anxious hours before Elizabeth's long-awaited birth. Instead of celebrating their hard-won victory and miraculous breakthrough, he was consumed by crippling fear and uncertainty. A last-minute prenatal ultrasound scan conducted in the final days of pregnancy had revealed one deeply troubling, alarming detail. The developing baby's cranial head measurement appeared significantly smaller than the standard, healthy average for a fetus at that precise stage of gestational development. It is absolutely critical for us to contextualize this uncertainty for modern listeners. 1981 ultrasound technology was extremely primitive, blurry, low resolution, and wildly imprecise compared to the high-definition, highly accurate imaging equipment we rely on in modern healthcare today. The odd, concerning measurement could easily have been a simple technical scanning error, a minor misread caused by outdated equipment limitations, or a fleeting positional trick of the fetus during imaging. But it could also have been a terrifying sign of catastrophic, irreversible developmental damage, a severe congenital birth defect, or a fatal fetal abnormality that would end in tragedy at birth. Notice how few people in modern audiences truly understand the earth-shattering stakes of that single uncertain ultrasound reading. Howard Jones understood better than anyone alive exactly what devastating consequences would follow if this first American IVF baby was born with severe defects, health complications, or did not survive delivery. The entire nation, the entire global medical community, and countless skeptical critics were watching their experimental program like hawks, waiting eagerly for them to fail spectacularly. If the first American IVF baby was unhealthy, deformed, or stillborn, the public backlash would have been immediate, catastrophic, and irreversible. Newspapers across every state in America would run screaming, sensationalist front-page headlines decrying the failed test tube monster created by reckless, arrogant scientists tampering with human life. Religious conservative leaders and anti-reproductive advocacy groups would have seized the tragedy as definitive, irrefutable proof that IVF was immoral, dangerous, and fundamentally against divine will and natural law. State and federal government regulators would have immediately and permanently shut down the groundbreaking Jones Institute, banned all future IVF research and clinical practice nationwide, and criminalized the entire emerging field of reproductive fertilization technology. Every single one of their 3 years of tireless, sacrificial work, every hopeful patient's fragile dream of parenthood, every future chance at American IVF progress would have been completely destroyed overnight, set back by decades, if not generations, of medical advancement, faced with that unimaginable pressure, that existential threat to an entire emerging medical field. Howard Jones did something I find simultaneously heartbreakingly vulnerable and profoundly heroic. He sat down, alone in his quiet office on that tense December night, with the weight of an entire nation's reproductive future on his shoulders, and wrote 2 completely separate, fully polished official press releases. The first carefully crafted release was written exclusively for a miracle outcome. It formally announced the safe, healthy, full-term birth of America's very first IVF baby, a perfect baby girl weighing exactly 5 pounds 12 ounces, framing the delivery as a resounding scientific triumph and humanitarian success that proved IVF was safe, viable, and life-affirming. The second Samba, carefully worded release was written exclusively for total disaster. It was prepared to address a defective birth, a premature fetal loss, or a complete experimental failure, crafted to manage the inevitable public outrage, scrutiny, and condemnation that would follow any tragic outcome. He folded both official documents neatly and carefully slipped them into the inner pocket of his winter coat. Then he drove slowly to Norfolk General Hospital, settled into the quiet hospital waiting room, and endured a long, sleepless, anxiety-filled night of waiting, holding the entire future of American reproductive medicine in the palm of his hand. The endless anxious wait finally ended at exactly 7:46 a.m. on the crisp, clear morning of December 28, 1981. Following a scheduled, safe cesarean section delivery performed by the hospital's expert obstetric team, Elizabeth Jordan Carr officially entered the world. She weighed precisely 5 pounds 12 ounces at birth, and by every single medical measurement, evaluation, and assessment available in 1981, she was a completely, perfectly, unconditionally healthy baby girl in every possible way. The troubling, fear-inducing ultrasound scan from days prior had been nothing more than an inaccurate technical error caused by outdated, low-quality imaging technology. All of Howard Jones's worst fears had been completely unfounded. The long-awaited miracle was real, tangible, and perfect. The very second Elizabeth let out her first tiny, precious cry, the first independent breath of the very first American IVF baby, the entire operating room erupted in pure, unbridled, emotional joy and relief. Every doctor, nurse, and medical staff member who had worked tirelessly, day and night, on this experimental IVF project for 3 grueling years wept tears of pure happiness and overwhelming relief. Doctors Howard and Georgiana Jones embraced each other tightly, exhausted beyond measure after years of heartbreak and struggle, yet elated beyond words at their hard-won historic victory. With hands steady with relief, Howard Jones reached into his coat pocket, pulled out both of the carefully prepared press releases, and made the historic choice that changed modern medicine forever. He crumpled up the second, disaster-focused press release, the one he had dreaded needing to use more than anything in the world, and tossed it aside permanently, never to see the light of day. The catastrophic ending that would have destroyed American IVF before the field could even officially begin was completely avoided, erased by one perfect, healthy baby's birth. The positive, triumphant press release was immediately distributed to global media outlets within mere hours of Elizabeth's birth, and the groundbreaking news exploded across every major newspaper, television network, and radio station in the United States and around the world. The New York Times ran a historic, iconic front-page announcement declaring that the first American laboratory-conceived test-tube baby had been born healthy and whole in Norfolk, Virginia, marking an unprecedented leap forward for modern medical science. Following the delivery, Elizabeth's parents Judith and Roger Carr were given a clear, intentional, life-altering choice by their medical team. They could opt to keep their family's incredible story completely private, shield their fragile newborn daughter from all public attention and media scrutiny, and live quietly with their long-awaited miracle in peace. Or they could bravely step into the global media spotlight and share their deeply personal journey, their struggles, and their joy with the entire world. What strikes me most profoundly is that the Carrs made an incredibly intentional, selfless, future-focused choice that permanently reshaped global public perception of IVF technology for generations to come. Without hesitation, they chose to step fully into the public spotlight and share their story openly and honestly. They refused to allow the widespread public myth and fear to persist that IVF children were mysterious, unnatural, or scientifically abnormal experiments. They wanted the entire world to see clearly that they were simply an ordinary, loving married couple, with the exact same dreams, hopes, and desires for a family as every other couple on the planet. They wanted global audiences to understand definitively that their newborn daughter was a completely normal, healthy human child who would grow up to walk, talk, laugh, learn, and live exactly like every other kid in the world. They bravely put their private family life on full public display purely out of selfless compassion, to prove to millions of other hopeless infertile families that IVF was a safe, viable, legitimate path to parenthood, not a dangerous scientific gamble. Just 3 short days after her historic birth, tiny infant Elizabeth Carr attended her first official global press conference, and the relentless, lifelong global media circus that would define her unique childhood officially began. I want you to take a moment to truly wrap your mind around the surreal, overwhelming experience of growing up under constant, unrelenting global public scrutiny, with professional cameras, reporters, and media attention tracking your every single move from the literal day you were born until adulthood. Elizabeth Carr has openly, candidly described her entire childhood and adolescent years as a non-stop, chaotic global media circus, and that simple description is no exaggeration whatsoever. From the exact moment of her historic birth, national and international media outlets documented every single detail of her childhood endlessly. PBS filmed her actual delivery for a nationally broadcast documentary that introduced American audiences to the new world of IVF technology. Newspaper photographers and television news crews followed her family to their home, their community events, her school functions, and every public outing. She could not attend a high school football game on the sidelines, participate in a school dance, play in her own backyard, or even walk through her neighborhood without television cameras and curious reporters tracking her every action and reaction. As she herself has openly shared in countless interviews, she has existed in the public eye, subject to endless media questions, public curiosity, and global attention, since long before she could even walk, talk, or form memories of her own. The most bizarre, eye-opening part of her lifelong public scrutiny is the endless stream of strange, uninformed, almost absurd questions that complete strangers have asked her consistently for 40-plus years, decade after decade. The most common and shocking question never fails to surprise me. Even today, total strangers regularly ask Elizabeth Carr if she has a belly button. This is not a silly, outdated joke or a forgotten 1980s myth that faded with time. People still genuinely ask her this question in modern interviews and public interactions. I notice this single bizarre question perfectly captures the widespread public ignorance, misunderstanding, and misinformation that surrounded early IVF technology and persisted for decades after her birth. The general public genuinely and mistakenly believed that early IVF babies were fully manufactured and grown entirely in a test tube in a laboratory, with no gestational development inside a human mother's body whatsoever. They had zero accurate understanding of how IVF technology actually functions. They had no idea that the only laboratory-based step in the entire IVF process is the initial fertilization of egg and sperm inside a sterile Petri dish. After that single lab-based conception step is complete, the tiny newly formed human embryo is immediately transferred back into the mother's natural womb, where it grows, develops, matures, and gestates for 9 full months exactly like any traditional, naturally conceived pregnancy. Elizabeth spent 9 full months developing inside her mother's body, nourished by a natural placenta and umbilical cord, just like every single human being born in the history of the world. She has a fully normal belly button, fully normal human anatomy, and is biologically identical to every other naturally born person on our planet. Elizabeth often jokes gently in modern interviews that people consistently assume she is far older than her actual age, a common misconception she has dealt with her entire adult life. As of 2026, she is only 44 years old, and she often reflects with remarkable humility and perspective that in her mind, despite 40-plus years of medical progress and millions of successful IVF births worldwide, IVF technology still feels like it is firmly in its infancy, still constantly evolving, improving, and advancing toward greater accessibility, safety, and precision. I notice how grounded, humble, and forward-thinking that statement truly is, especially coming directly from the woman who single-handedly started the entire American IVF revolution and paved the way for every modern advancement in the field. As a confused, self-conscious teenager growing up under unprecedented global attention, Elizabeth struggled deeply with the unique, isolating weight of her one-of-a-kind legacy. She often resented being permanently defined by the single label of America's first IVF baby, a title that overshadowed her individuality, her personality, and her personal identity. She just wanted to be a normal teenage kid, with normal teenage problems, normal friendships, normal privacy, and normal life experiences, free from the crushing global pressure of being a living scientific symbol and historical milestone. But as she matured into a thoughtful, compassionate, self-aware adult, her entire perspective on her legacy shifted completely and profoundly. She began to fully understand the true, far-reaching magnitude of her historic birth, not just for her own loving parents, but for millions of desperate, hopeful families across the entire globe. She stopped viewing herself as a scientific oddity or a public spectacle and started embracing her identity as the proud, grateful older sister of every single IVF baby born across the world in the decades after her birth. By her most recent public calculations, More than 12 million human beings across every continent on Earth are alive today thanks entirely to IVF reproductive technology. 12 million unique, precious lives, 12 million loving families, 12 million personal stories of hope and redemption made possible solely because of that single historic birth in Virginia back in 1981. That profound realization filled her heart with immense gratitude, overwhelming pride, and a powerful sense of lifelong purpose that has guided every part of her adult life. Elizabeth went on to build a successful, meaningful career as a professional journalist and media advocate, a career path she partly chose as a direct result of her lifelong experience being on the receiving end of constant media interviews and public questioning. From the earliest days of her childhood, she was constantly approached by reporters asking endless questions about her unique origins, her childhood experience, and her place in medical history. At a very young age, she learned to confidently flip the script on journalists, turning the interview back on them to ask about their professional motivations, their storytelling goals, and their personal perspectives on the stories they covered. That lifelong comfort with media, communication, and public dialogue shaped her professional path, leading her to hold respected roles at prestigious national media outlets including the Boston Globe and the Poynter Institute for Media Studies. Most importantly, she intentionally used her one-of-a-kind global platform not for personal fame, celebrity status, or public attention, but for genuine public good, dedicating her career to advocating for equal, affordable fertility access for all families, comprehensive patient education to eliminate IVF misinformation, and greater public understanding of reproductive technology for marginalized, underserved, and LGBTQ+ communities who rely on assisted reproduction to build their families. Then, in 2010, Elizabeth accomplished something incredibly powerful and symbolic that permanently dismantled every single remaining public critique, scientific doubt, and harmful cultural myth surrounding the long-term health and viability of IVF-conceived children. She had a healthy, happy child of her own. On August 5, 2010, Elizabeth Carr, now known professionally and personally as Elizabeth Camo, after her marriage, gave birth to a healthy baby boy named Trevor James Camo, who weighed a perfect 7 pounds 12 ounces at delivery. The most groundbreaking, myth-shattering detail of Trevor's birth was simple yet revolutionary. He was conceived completely naturally, with zero IVF intervention, zero medical fertility assistance, and zero artificial reproductive technology whatsoever. What strikes me most profoundly is that this single natural, uncomplicated birth erased decades of harmful, cruel, persistent speculation from IVF critics and skeptical medical opponents overnight. For the entire 30 years following Elizabeth's birth, anti-IVF activists and skeptical scientists had fiercely claimed that laboratory-conceived children were genetically defective, biologically inferior, and permanently infertile, incapable of natural reproduction and unable to sustain future generations of family life. They argued relentlessly that IVF created flawed, unnatural human beings who could not live normal, functional adult lives or build families of their own. But Elizabeth's healthy, natural pregnancy, smooth full-term gestation, and uncomplicated delivery of a perfectly healthy son completely, irrefutably demolished that toxic, baseless myth once and for all. She proved definitively to the entire world that IVF children are genetically normal, biologically healthy, fully capable of natural human conception, and completely able to build loving, sustainable families of their own just like every other naturally born adult. She even joked lightheartedly with her family and friends that she had spent decades dreading a sensational tabloid headline, reading "Test tube baby has test tube baby," but Trevor's completely natural, traditional conception stood as the ultimate, undeniable proof of IVF's long-term safety, normalcy, and human legitimacy through every single stage of Elizabeth's extraordinary life journey, from her high-profile, history-making birth, to her confused, scrutinized teenage years, to her successful professional career, to her beautiful journey into motherhood. The Jones family remained a constant, loving, nurturing presence in her life. Elizabeth has always affectionately and sincerely referred to Doctors Howard and Georgiana Jones as a beloved second set of grandparents, and it is easy to understand exactly why she feels that profound lifelong bond. The pioneering medical couple never once forgot their first historic American IVF baby, never lost touch, and never stopped caring for her well-being. Every single Christmas holiday and every single birthday throughout her childhood, adolescence, and young adulthood, they personally called Elizabeth to celebrate her, check in on her life, and watch her grow. For more than 30 consecutive years, Howard Jones faithfully attended every single one of Elizabeth's birthday parties, walking patiently alongside her as she navigated a completely unique childhood and young adulthood lived entirely under the unforgiving global public spotlight. He gently guided her through the confusion and isolation of childhood fame, comforted her during her teenage struggles with feeling different and misunderstood, and celebrated endlessly with her when she married and became a mother herself, witnessing the full circle of the miracle he and his wife had created. Georgiana Jones, the quiet, brilliant, meticulous scientific mastermind behind America's entire IVF breakthrough, lived long enough to watch Elizabeth grow from a tiny historic newborn into a confident, compassionate, successful adult and loving mother. She passed away peacefully in 2005 at the age of 92, leaving behind an unparalleled, irreplaceable legacy in global reproductive medicine and generations of grateful families. Howard Jones lived an incredibly long, remarkable life, reaching the extraordinary age of 104 before his peaceful passing in 2015. He spent his final 20 years of life writing detailed memoirs and educational books about his groundbreaking IVF journey, traveling the country to advocate for expanded, accessible fertility care for all families, and watching the revolutionary medical field he and his wife founded grow and evolve far beyond anything they could have possibly imagined in their early experimental days. To this very day, Johns Hopkins University honors their unmatched professional legacy with the dedicated Howard W. Jones Jr. and Georgiana Segar Jones Lectureship, an annual educational series that trains new generations of reproductive medicine pioneers and keeps their innovative research alive. When Georgiana passed away in 2005, Elizabeth honored her beloved mentor and lifelong guardian by wearing a special silver pendant engraved with Georgiana's personal initials and the number 1, a unique, heartfelt gift the Joneses had given her in childhood, permanently marking her as their very first American IVF miracle, a title she holds with endless gratitude and pride. Now, let us circle all the way back to the foundational question that opened this entire storytelling journey, the haunting thought experiment that frames the entire meaning of Elizabeth's life and legacy. What if Elizabeth Jordan Carr had never been born at all? It is important for us to acknowledge the obvious, factual truth first and foremost. IVF reproductive technology would have eventually arrived in the United States at some point in history. The core scientific biological principles were already proven and established in Britain with Louise Brown's groundbreaking 1978 birth. The foundational research existed, the biological mechanisms were understood, and forward-thinking American scientists were already exploring the potential of artificial fertilization technology. But what would have changed completely, Irreversibly and dramatically is the critical timing of American IVF adoption, the entire national public reception to the technology, the legal protections surrounding fertility treatment, and the global cultural acceptance of assisted reproduction as legitimate, safe healthcare. That nuanced distinction is the absolute key to understanding Elizabeth's irreplaceable historical impact. Elizabeth's historic 1981 birth did not merely prove that IVF technology could function safely and successfully on American soil. It humanized, normalized, and fully legitimized an experimental scientific technology that the vast majority of American citizens feared, distrusted, and outright rejected as dangerous and unethical. When the entire world looked upon the cover of Life magazine and saw a perfectly healthy, cuddly, normal baby girl, smiling, crying, sleeping, growing, and developing exactly like any other ordinary infant, no skeptical critic, religious opponent, or fearful citizen could honestly continue to claim that IVF created monstrous, unnatural, or defective human beings. The living, breathing proof of IVF safety, humanity, and normalcy was right there for the entire world to see. Impossible to deny or discredit. Did I notice how rapidly and dramatically the entire field of American reproductive medicine transformed in the immediate months and years following Elizabeth's birth? A transformative cultural and scientific shift that would have taken decades longer, if not generations, to achieve without her positive, relatable, human legacy. Within just a few short months of her historic delivery, top fertility experts and reproductive scientists from every single state across the United States flocked to the small Norfolk clinic to study directly under the Joneses, learn their revolutionary IVF methods, and replicate their successful protocols. The pioneering couple personally trained nearly every single leading American fertility specialist who dominated the field in the 1980s, 1990s, and 2000s, laying the entire foundational infrastructure for modern American reproductive medicine. Major elite universities including Yale University, the University of Pennsylvania, and Vanderbilt University rapidly launched their own official IVF research and clinical treatment programs, drastically expanding access to experimental fertility care for hopeful families across the entire nation today. The far-reaching impact of that single 1981 historic birth is almost impossible to fully quantify in words or numbers. More than 100,000 healthy, thriving babies are now born safely via IVF treatment in the United States every single year, and the global annual birth count stretches well into the millions of lives. What was once a terrifying, widely condemned fringe scientific experiment is now a routine, standard, respected, and life-affirming form of medical health care for millions of infertile couples, single parents, and LGBTQ+ families worldwide. But the endless ripple effects of Elizabeth's landmark birth extend infinitely further than just solving traditional infertility and helping hopeless couples conceive biological children. What strikes me most profoundly is that every single major modern reproductive medical innovation we celebrate and rely on today traces its direct, unbroken lineage back to that first successful American IVF birth and the Joneses' pioneering experimental work. Without the foundational success of early IVF technology, there would be no pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, universally known as PGD, the life-saving medical technology that allows modern doctors to carefully screen early-stage embryos for fatal, hereditary genetic conditions including cystic fibrosis, Huntington's disease, and Tay-Sachs disease before embryo implantation occurs. This revolutionary modern technology now allows countless families with dangerous hereditary genetic disorders to conceive and deliver completely healthy, disease-free children, eliminating generational suffering and saving thousands of innocent lives every single year. Without IVF's unique ability to safely grow, observe, and test human embryos in a controlled laboratory environment, this life-changing medical breakthrough would never have been possible. Without the foundational success of American IVF research, there would be no intracytoplasmic sperm injection, or ICSI, the revolutionary specialized fertility technique that allows men with extremely low sperm counts, severe sperm abnormalities, or complete male infertility to safely father healthy biological children. This game-changing 1992 medical innovation has granted the gift of fatherhood to countless men who would have been completely unable to conceive children through any natural or traditional medical means, and every single advancement in this technique is built entirely on the foundational IVF protocols the Joneses perfected with Elizabeth's historic birth. Without early American IVF pioneering work, there would be no safe, reliable human egg freezing technology, no long-term embryo banking systems, and no life-changing fertility preservation options for cancer patients facing life-saving chemotherapy and radiation treatment. Young men and women diagnosed with aggressive cancer, whose life-saving treatment would permanently destroy their natural reproductive ability, would have zero hope of future parenthood without IVF-derived fertility preservation techniques. IVF innovation created that irreplaceable lifeline for millions of cancer survivors worldwide, granting them the ability to build families after overcoming life-threatening illness, even completely beyond the scope of family building and fertility treatment itself. Early IVF research paved the critical way for revolutionary embryonic stem cell research that has completely regenerated modern therapeutic medicine, offering groundbreaking new hope for treating and potentially curing debilitating, incurable conditions including Parkinson's disease, severe spinal cord injuries, Alzheimer's disease, and dozens of other life-altering chronic illnesses. Every single one of these world-changing medical advances, every life saved, every family restored, every scientific breakthrough in modern reproductive and regenerative medicine traces its unbroken origin story back to the brave, risky, ultimately successful experimental IVF work that created Elizabeth Jordan Carr. It is almost incomprehensible for modern audiences to fully wrap their minds around the simple, staggering truth. One single healthy, ordinary baby girl, born on a quiet, cold December morning in a small Virginia hospital more than 40 years ago, laid the entire foundational framework for all modern global reproductive medicine. Every innovative treatment, every technological advancement, every hopeful family's dream fulfilled, every life saved from genetic disease or permanent infertility, all of it rests entirely on the humble, revolutionary legacy of her single birth. But here is the sobering, critical, essential truth I want every listener to carry with them long after this story ends. Medical progress is never permanent.